Hi everyone, welcome back to BRR Knowledge Center. And today in this session, we'll talk about the standards and best practices of coding in C Sharp. Uh, I think if we can have best practices while writing a coding, we have several benefits as part of security and performance and consistency. This is what the main context we need to discuss about here. If we can follow the coding practices and best coding standards, we'll have a consistent coding and can be understandable by any developer and can be very easily can be extended the existing code. So a coding standard ensures that all developers writing the code in a particular language write coding into based on the guidelines defined, right? So if you can follow the guidelines defined as part of coding, it will make the code easy to understand and provide consistency in the code. So one of the most essential factors in a software system is the consistency of a coding standard. So this is because it positively impacts the quality of the system, right? So while using a software system, so we need to ensure that guidelines do not contradict each other. That way, I think we must follow the naming conventions and coding standards. This evolves a consistency of your code, and the source code that uses the standard should also be in harmony with each standard or with the defined standard. So there are a lot of benefits we have if we can follow the coding standards. Necessarily, we must follow this. Let me explain you the areas we need to consider it, the naming conventions or standards. We need to follow it. I'll explain them in my notepad here, uh, like coding standards in C Sharp. So when you are developing a program, so we must look at the areas like namespace and class and methods and parameters and variables. These are the frequent areas each and every developer touching as part of writing a program, right? So if you wanted to write these areas or these relevant stuff, we must follow some coding standards here. So before we get into here, I'll just wanted to explain about you. There are a lot of naming conventions we have in the industry, like camel case and Pascal case and snake notation or Hungarian notation. There are a lot of stuff we have it. So if you are basically a Python developer, I suggest to use a snake notation. And if you're basically a developer in Java, I think .NET use a Pascal case or camel case. And if you are in a Visual Basic kind of stuff, you are having it knowledge, go for an Hungarian notation or camel case. So in this session, we'll talk about two notations here. One is a camel case and another one is Pascal case. So what is these two notations and what is the difference between these two notations? So both are having the same definition except no first word which is in the name. And if I wanted to define the definition of camel notation, all the words of first character should be uppercase except the first word. This is what the definition of camel case. And coming to the Pascal case, all the words of first character should be uppercase and other characters are lowercase. So this is what the difference. That is, for example, back color. These are two words, and the first word, first letter must be a lowercase. That means except first word, remaining all words first character was uppercase. Except first word, right? This is what the definition of camel notation. And for color and first name, last name, like this. When it comes to Pascal notation, the naming convention, it would be, all words first character was capital. Back color, for color, first name, last name. Okay, so these two notations we are going to discuss about in this session, like namespace, class, methods, and parameters and variables. Okay, the first one was namespace. Suggest to use a Pascal case here. That means if I wanted to define a namespace, I suggest to go with the Pascal notation. So I wanted to create a namespace to do a location registration actions. Then I'll define location registration, right? And public namespace location registration. Okay, so I suggest to use Pascal notation here. Okay, and coming to the next point here, class. So even for this also, always use Pascal case for the class names, but try to give a class name as noun or noun phrase to understand more on the class what it does. That means always use Pascal case for the class name and use noun or noun phrase for the class names. Okay, don't give a prefix or don't give an underscore here. That you need to make sure. Do not use prefix. Don't use underscore. The classes. Okay. Simple example. If I wanted to say in minimal view as public class location registration, it is inheriting some class one, and this will be like this. So class name also I'm suggesting to use Pascal case, but use a noun here. Here location registration, location and registration. So both are having a meaningful description here. Location registration being used for registering a location here, right? That is what the noun and noun phrase using it for class name. And coming to the methods. So I suggest to use this also Pascal casing here. Always use Pascal case for the method names. Let's say get locations. Okay, and save location. Edit location, right? So use a Pascal case for the method names. Also, it is more intuitive for your names, and it will tell you what it does and what it is doing and what action it is performing based on the name you are providing it for method name, right? So coming to the interface. So this interface basically always use letter I as a prefix, the name of interface, and after letter I use same Pascal case, right? Example like I location or I employ or I kind of students. Okay. And coming to the next one was a parameter, and last one was variables. So here it comes a camel notation here. For the parameter, I'm having it at two kind of things here. One is use camel casing and use descriptive parameter name here. So use camel case with the descriptive name. That way it is more meaningful for the user. Example, kind of parameter I'm passing is a patient ID. Let us say patient ID, employee ID, student ID, right? So this is what, no descriptive name like employee ID, student ID, and the notation was camel case. So here thing was suggesting is use names based on the parameters meaning rather than the parameters type. Okay, that means don't consider declare a variable based on a type of parameter like int patient ID, int employee ID, or int student ID. So this is the wrong notation. So you must not use this notation. You must always consider the meaning of the parameter. Okay, ID belongs to patient, ID belongs to employee, right? So this is not a correct notation. And coming to the variables, basically variables are several scopes we have it, mainly basically public and private. And in the public kind of variables, okay, we default use Pascal case for public variables. Let us say like public int employee ID is 100. But when it comes to private, use underscore. How can I say that? Always try to use a camel case prefix with underscore. Use camel case with prefix underscore. That means example private int location ID equal to 100. Okay, similar way private int employee ID equal to 100. Okay, so these are the notations we basically follow it for writing the namespace, class, methods, and parameters and variables. Okay, apart from these there are other areas we need to consider it, like having cases like avoid having huge lines of code in a method. That means each method must not exceed 25 lines. If a method has more than 25 lines, then consider refactoring with a separate method and then call inside of the method. Okay, and another one is try to use try catch block with finally block and mention dispose of all the used objects in finally block. So that means you must use try catch block because we are not anticipating it. We are not predict what error it is coming out when you're running a program. Hence, you need to use try catch block. And at the same time, you need to mention it all dispose or destroy or making of null or nothing objects in finally block. That way you have good practice in using of objects and using of memory, right? So even though it is supporting dynamic or automatic garbage collector, but it won't come always to clear them when you're using or having it in a requirement. It only comes into the picture when it really requires a space to define a variable or keep the variable in the memory. Until unless there is a requirement, or there is no requirement, it won't commit. And if you are doing it using a finally block as a regular practice, it will automatically clear and remove the unused objects. And that way you are managing your memory. And I suggest to explicitly mention it all the disposable lines of code in the finally block. And third one is, avoid having, hard coded path or driver name the code. Avoid or never use hard code a path. So instead of that, get the application path programmatically and use relative paths. Okay, this is one more case you need to look at this. And another one is avoid using of public methods or properties until unless there is a really a requirement to use it outside of your class. Don't declare them as a public. Okay, so suggest to define internal because if they are accessed only within the same assembly. Okay, if they are accessed or if they wanted to access within the same assembly, define them as internal scope methods and properties. Okay, and the next one is the kind of standard was always add assembly info file where you define the uh, kind of version and description of your API or the project, and company name and copyright, etc. This is the best practice. And the next one was a kind of stuff is writing of a comments. So don't write comments for each line or each variable declaration. So that is not a good practice. If you wanted to define a comment, and better to define it in your endpoint or header section of your method like this way, and you define your summary and parameter names and return types, and don't define or write a comment for each line of program or each variable declaration. Okay, so these are some other areas we need to look at here. And if you're following all these guidelines, so you will have kind of benefits, like if you're not following without coding standard, if you're went for developing a program, certainly you will have a couple of negative impacts. Kind of, first one is the security issues. The main reasons for commonly exploited software vulnerabilities are inconsistencies, bugs, and errors in the logic. So most of these problems arises due to programming errors that result from poor coding practice. Another one was site performance issues. If you're not following a coding standard, bad coding affects the overall performance of the site. Various performance issues, including, user interactions, server response, core usability, flow issues, UI issues. There are a lot of issues are coming up when you're not following coding standards. So So if you can follow the best coding practices, we can easily avoid all these aspects, and especially the consistency of code you are providing it if you're following best code practices, and that is more useful for any developer to enhance or extend your code and debug your code. So I hope you understand and know the areas we regularly touches when you're writing a program, and kind of notations we use to follow, and kind of points we need to make sure to avoid, and areas we need to use it as part of programming development. Okay, thanks for watching this video, and please subscribe this channel for more videos. Thank you.